All right, let's just jump right in. Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to be looking at a seriously fascinating concept from our source data today. It's what we call a paradox shift. Basically, we're challenging a massive assumption that practically every organization makes about workplace happiness and well-being metrics. Because, we usually think we know exactly what a happy, thriving employee looks like, right? They're super decisive, they're full of energy, they always have a smile on their face. But what if the metrics we use to track that well-being are actually completely backwards for a huge chunk of your workforce? What if that glowing red flag on your HR dashboard is actually a sign of deep structural integrity? Well, let's unpack this.
So we've all seen those standard engagement surveys. If an employee flags that they, struggle to make decisions, if they check the box that says, I do not find it easy to make decisions, our absolute first instinct is to flag it. We label it a warning sign, it's an amber alert for a well-being deficit. We immediately think, oh man, they're paralyzed, they're burned out, they're definitely unhappy. Basically, we pathologize the friction. But does decisional difficulty actually always mean someone's at risk? Well, behavioral science and massive global datasets tell us absolutely not. No way.
To put this into perspective, let's look at the Oxford Happiness Survey. It reveals this incredibly reliable, fascinating correlation of 0.0546. Now, across a massive sample, over 1,700 people spanning 81 different countries, struggling to make a decision actually correlates positively with what spiral dynamics theory calls the blue vMEME. If you're familiar with the theory, you know a vMEME is essentially a core psychological value system. And for the blue worldview, life is totally anchored in duty, order, and structure. So for these folks, admitting a decision isn't easy doesn't mean they're having a mental breakdown. Actually, it means their internal wiring is working exactly like it's supposed to.
So what looks like friction on the surface is actually something else entirely. It's called principled deliberation. For the blue value system, pausing to make a decision is definitely not a sign of misery, and it's not some annoying efficiency drag. It is literally a critical integrity-preserving protocol. When they tell you a decision is hard, what they're actually saying is, hey, this choice requires careful weighing. I need to make sure this action aligns with my duties, the systemic rules, and my moral standards before I take a single step forward. So it's not paralysis at all, it's moral calibration. They are actively preserving the integrity of the entire system.
And when you cross-reference the data, this really clear psychological profile emerges. Individuals driven by this blue value system absolutely agree that life is good, and they report really high energy. They are not walking around miserable. But, and this is the crucial catch, they explicitly reject performative cheerfulness. They are absolutely not going to fake a laugh or force a big smile just to boost the team's good vibes. It's kind of like asking a judge to do stand-up comedy while reading a verdict, right? It just doesn't fit the context. Their baseline for happiness comes from serious duty fulfillment and structural integrity, not from, spontaneous outbursts of joy.
The wild thing is, depending on your hidden psychological wiring, your specific vMEME, you'll interpret the exact same hesitation completely differently. While blue sees this principled weighing, the orange vMEME, which is that core psychological system driven by strategy and achievement, they just see an efficiency drag. They want rapid, action-biased prototyping to break the deadlock right now. Meanwhile, the green vMEME, which is all about community and empathy, they see decision difficulty as relational uncertainty. They want to hit pause for empathetic consultation, just to make sure everyone's in harmony. So you have the exact same data point creating three entirely different colliding realities.
Which brings us to the system reaction. Think about what happens when organizations apply this blanket, universal metric that says decisional ease equals well-being. Imagine being a deeply committed blue employee, and management basically tells you that your careful, rule-following deliberation is just a lack of resilience, or worse, that you're just indecisive. When you treat their moral calibration as a deficit, that principled coherence just fractures. Trust absolutely erodes. The employee feels profoundly alienated because they realize their deep commitment to doing things the right way is actively being punished in favor of just doing things the fast way.
We have to be super careful here, because this is exactly how that breakdown practically plays out. It's a slippery slope and escalation phase that most companies trigger without even realizing it. Step 1. The company pushes an expressiveness universal framing of happiness. Basically meaning you must be fast, smiling, and visibly cheerful to be considered a good employee. Step 2. This breeds integrity skepticism. The blue employees realize, hey, my core values aren't respected here. Then comes step 3, performative cheerfulness. The employee fakes the smile and rushes the decision just to survive the toxic culture. And finally, step 4, silent, principled drift. It's not some dramatic, screaming resignation. No, it is a quiet, disastrous drift away from their core principles, which ultimately leaves your organization without the very people holding its structural integrity together. So how do we actually fix this? That brings us to our next section, dynamic modeling and navigating the butterfly effect.
To manage all this complex psychology, behavioral science uses dynamic programming models built on over 13,000 real-world correlations. And this predictive power is being massively accelerated by a major 2026 trend called AI vibe coding. Basically, what that means is users can just instruct large language models in natural language to build complex, predictive apps without writing a single line of traditional code. Using tools developed exactly this way, like the SD Navigator interface, leaders can literally simulate management actions. You can input a decision, like, say, enforcing remote work, and the algorithm processes it through those thousands of behavioral correlations based on your specific team's psychological profile. It calculates the resulting levels of fear, trust, and well-being, which allows you to engineer your culture based on hard data, rather than just relying on a gut feeling.
I want to leave you with a really powerful, lingering question to consider for your own teams. What breaks in your organization when decisional ease is framed as a universal happiness indicator rather than a contextual signal? And maybe more importantly, how do you design well-being frameworks that actually preserve principled deliberation? Because at the end of the day, true organizational health doesn't come from forcing performative positivity. It comes from honoring contextual integrity and recognizing that sometimes the absolute hardest decisions are the ones keeping your company's soul intact. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gives you a completely new lens for understanding your team.